Chidinma stood frozen in the doorway of the bedroom she'd shared with her husband for 8 years, her 7 months pregnant belly pressing against the doorframe. The sound coming from inside wasn't the television. It was laughter, female laughter, mixed with her husband's deep voice, the same voice that had whispered sweet promises in her ear just this morning before he left for an important business meeting. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. Her hand trembled as she pushed the door open wider. The hinges creaked, and the scene before her seemed to unfold in slow motion. Chukudi, her husband of 8 years, lay tangled in their marital bed with a woman Chidinma recognized immediately. Ngozi, her own cousin. The same cousin who had been living with them for the past 6 months, the one Chidinma had welcomed into their home in Lagos when she needed a place to stay. The bedsheets, the ones Chidinma had washed and ironed just yesterday, were twisted around their naked bodies. Ngozi's designer handbag, the one Chidinma couldn't afford but had admired, sat carelessly on the floor beside a pair of expensive shoes. Chukwudi's clothes formed a trail from the door to the bed, evidence of their haste, their hunger for each other. Chidinma. Chukwudi scrambled up, his eyes wide with shock, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like relief, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Chidinma felt her 6-year-old daughter Adana tug at her wrapper from behind. "Mama, why are you crying?" She hadn't even realized tears were streaming down her face. Her 4-year-old son Chinedu peeked around her legs, his innocent eyes trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Get out," Chidinma whispered, her voice barely audible. Ngozi had the audacity to smile, a small, satisfied curl of her lips, as she reached for her clothes. "Chidinma, I can explain." "Explain." The word erupted from Chidinma's throat like thunder. "In my bed, with my husband, while my children are in the next room." Her voice rose with each question, 8 years of being the perfect wife, the understanding partner, the woman who sacrificed everything, finally breaking through. "You're my cousin. My blood." "Some blood is thinner than others," Ngozi said, her voice cold as she buttoned her blouse, Chidinma's blouse, the one she'd lent her last week. "Maybe if you'd kept your husband satisfied, he wouldn't have needed me." The slap came before Chidinma could stop herself. Her palm connected with Ngozi's cheek with a sharp crack that echoed through the small bedroom of their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Surulere. The apartment Chukwudi had insisted they move to 3 years ago, claiming his business was struggling, that they needed to downsize temporarily. Ngozi's hand flew to her face, eyes blazing. "You'll regret that. Regret. Regret." Chidinma's laugh was bitter, hollow. "The only thing I regret is trusting either of you." Chukwudi finally found his voice, pulling on his trousers with shaking hands. "Chidinma, calm down. Think about the baby. Your blood pressure." "Don't you dare talk about my baby." Chidinma's hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly, protecting the life growing inside her. "Don't you dare pretend you care about this child when you're here, in our bed, with her." "It's not what it looks like," Chukwudi said, his voice taking on that smooth, practiced tone she'd heard 1,000 times before when he was trying to talk his way out of something. But this time, his eyes couldn't meet hers. This time, even he couldn't sell the lie. "Really?" "Because it looks like my husband is sleeping with my cousin while I'm 7 months pregnant with his 3rd child." Chidinma's voice cracked. "How long? How long has this been going on?" The silence that followed was deafening. Ngozi and Chukwudi exchanged a glance, just a brief look, but it told Chidinma everything she needed to know. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was something deeper, something calculated. 6 months, Ngozi said finally, her chin lifting defiantly. "Since the day I moved in." The world tilted. Chidinma reached for the doorframe to steady herself. 6 months. 6 months of lies. 6 months of watching them together in her home, at her dinner table, playing with her children, all while they were betraying her under her own roof. "I want you both out," Chidinma said, her voice suddenly calm with the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. "Now." Chukwudi's expression changed. The guilt vanished, replaced by something harder, colder. "Out? This is my house, Chidinma. My name on the lease. If anyone's leaving, it's you. Your house. Chidinma stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man she'd married. I've worked 2 jobs for 5 years while you looked for opportunities. I've raised our children while you disappeared for days at a time. I've stood by you through every failed business, every broken promise. And you'll continue to stand by me, Chikwudi interrupted, his voice turning menacing. Or you'll stand on the street. With nothing. You have no money, no job anymore since you quit to take care of this pregnancy, and nowhere to go. So maybe you should be the one thinking carefully about what happens next. Chidinma looked at the man before her, the stranger wearing her husband's face, and then at her cousin, who was now applying lipstick as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just destroyed a family. Behind her, Adana was crying softly, and Chinedu was asking why Papa was being mean to Mama. In that moment, looking at her children's confused faces and her swollen belly, Chidinma made a decision. Fine, she said quietly. Keep your apartment. Keep your mistress. But mark my words, Chikwudi Okafor, you will regret this day. Both of you will. She turned to leave, her children clinging to her wrapper, when Chikwidi's laugh stopped her. Regret? What are you going to do, Chidinma? You're nobody. You have nothing. You are nothing without me. Chidinma paused in the doorway, her hand resting on her belly where their unborn child kicked as if in protest. What Chikwudi didn't know, what no one knew except her late mother's lawyer who had called her just yesterday, would change everything. But for now, she simply walked away, her children in tow, leaving behind the only home they'd known and the man who just destroyed their family. What do you think Chidinma should do next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Echoes of Africa for more gripping stories of betrayal and revenge. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens when Chikwudi discovers what he's really lost. Where are you watching from? Let us know below. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the one-room apartment Chidinma had managed to rent in Ajigunle, one of Lagos's most challenging neighborhoods. It was a far cry from even the modest Surulere apartment she'd left behind 3 days ago. The ceiling leaked in 2 corners, water dripping steadily into the plastic buckets she'd positioned on the bare concrete floor. Adana and Chinedu huddled together on the thin mattress they all shared, their small bodies pressed close for warmth and comfort. Chidinma sat on the only chair in the room, a wobbly wooden thing she'd found abandoned in the corridor, and stared at the envelope in her hands. The return address read, Okeke and Associates, Legal Practitioners, Victoria Island, Lagos. Her mother's lawyer had called her 5 times since the day of the betrayal, but she'd been too consumed with finding shelter for her children to answer. Now, in the quiet aftermath of her world falling apart, she finally opened it. Her hands shook as she unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the words once, twice, 3 times before her brain could process what she was reading. Dear Mrs. Chidinma Okafor, regarding the estate of your late mother, Mrs. Adiz Nwosu. Chidinma's mother had died 2 years ago from complications of diabetes. The funeral had been simple. Chikwudi had insisted they couldn't afford anything elaborate. Her mother had lived modestly, working as a teacher in Enugu, and Chidinma had assumed there was nothing left after the medical bills were paid. She had been wrong. We are pleased to inform you that you are the sole beneficiary of the following properties: a 4-bedroom duplex in Lekki Phase 1, Lagos, a 3-bedroom bungalow in GRA, Enugu, and a commercial property currently leased to tenants in Ikeja, generating monthly rental income of 850,000 Nigerian nairas. The letter slipped from Chidinma's fingers and floated to the damp floor. She couldn't breathe. Her mother, her quiet, humble mother, had owned property worth millions of naira? Rental income that could change everything? Mama, I'm hungry. Chinedu's small voice broke through her shock. Chidinma looked at her son's thin face, at the way Adana was trying to comfort him even though her own stomach must be growling too. They'd eaten only gari and groundnut for the past 2 days. She'd spent her last 3,000 Nigerian nairas on this room's weekly rent, and her phone had been buzzing with calls from Chikwudi, calls she refused to answer. But now everything could change. She picked up the letter with trembling hands and read further. However, there are certain legal complications that require your immediate attention. Your husband, Mr. Chikwudi Okafor, has contacted our office claiming marital rights to the properties. Additionally, a Miss Ngozi Nwosu has also made inquiries, claiming to be your mother's rightful heir as a closer blood relative. We urgently need to meet with you to resolve these matters and finalize the transfer of assets. Please contact our office within 7 days, or these claims may proceed to court. The shock of betrayal hit Chidinma anew, but this time it burned hotter, fiercer. Chukwudi knew. Somehow, he knew about her inheritance. And Ngozi, her own cousin, was trying to steal what rightfully belonged to Chidinma and her children. The pieces suddenly clicked into place like a horrifying puzzle. Chukwudi's sudden coldness over the past 6 months. His insistence that she quit her job as a bank teller to focus on the pregnancy. Ngozi's convenient arrival, her questions about Auntie Adi's properties that Chidinma had dismissed as casual conversation. The way Chukwudi had been pushing her to sign documents he claimed were just routine paperwork for his business. Documents she'd refused to sign because something felt wrong. They'd been planning this. Both of them. They'd been waiting for her mother's estate to be settled before they struck. A knock on the door made Chidinma jump. She glanced at her children, who looked up with frightened eyes. Nobody knew they were here except the landlord, a pot-bellied man named Mr. Adeyemi who'd reluctantly agreed to rent to a heavily pregnant woman with 2 children only because she'd paid 3 weeks in advance. "Who is it?" Chidinma called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "Chidinma, I know you're in there." Chukwudi's voice came through the thin door, smooth and controlled. "We need to talk." Adana whimpered and buried her face in the mattress. Chinedu crawled closer to his sister, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. They'd asked about their father repeatedly over the past 3 days, and each time Chidinma had struggled to explain why Papa wasn't with them, why they'd left their home, why everything had changed. "Go away, Chukwudi," Chidinma said, quickly folding the letter and tucking it into her bra, the safest place she could think of. "You have nothing to say that I want to hear. It's about your mother's properties." His voice was different now, harder, more businesslike. "I know you've been contacted by the lawyers. Don't be stupid, Chidinma. You need me to claim that inheritance. We're still married. Those properties are marital assets, which means they're mine too. Let me in so we can discuss this like adults." Chidinma stood up, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. She moved to the door but didn't open it. "Marital assets? Is that what Ngozi is too? A marital asset you decided to share with yourself? Don't be dramatic. What happened between Ngozi and me has nothing to do with this. This is about securing our children's future. Your future. Do you think you can manage multiple properties on your own? Do you even know how to handle tenants, maintenance, legal issues? You're 7 months pregnant and living in a slum, for God's sake. Be reasonable. Reasonable." Chidinma laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You want me to be reasonable? You, who threw me and your children out while I'm carrying your baby. You, who's been sleeping with my cousin under our roof. You want to talk about being reasonable? I didn't throw you out. You left," Chukwudi corrected, his voice taking on that patronizing tone she'd heard so many times before. "And I'm giving you a chance to come back. We can work this out. I'll end things with Ngozi. We'll use the rental income to start fresh, maybe move into the Lekki property. Think about Adana and Chinedu. Don't they deserve better than this?" He paused, and she could hear him breathing close to the door. "Don't they deserve their father?" The emotional manipulation was so familiar it almost worked. For a moment, Chidinma saw the future he was painting. Her children in a beautiful home, going to good schools, having their father present. Wasn't that what every mother wanted? But then Chinedu coughed, a wet, rattling sound that came from spending 3 nights in a damp room, and Chidinma remembered who had put them here. Who had chosen his mistress over his family. Who had called her nothing, while standing in their bedroom with another woman. "No," she said firmly. "The answer is no. Those properties are mine. My mother left them to me, not to you. And I will die before I let you or Ngozi take what belongs to my children." The silence that followed was heavy with menace. When Chukwudi spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of civility. "You're making a mistake, Chidinma. A very big mistake. You think you know how to fight, You think you can win against me? He laughed, low and cruel. I have connections. I have lawyers. I have Ngozi, who's willing to testify that your mother promised her those properties before she died. What do you have? Nothing. You're living in a rat hole in Ajigunal, 7 months pregnant with no money and no support. By the time I'm done with you in court, you'll be begging me to take you back. Get out, Chidinma said, her voice cold. Before I call the police. With what phone? Your battery died yesterday, didn't it? I saw you trying to charge it at that shop down the street. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but she heard every word clearly. I'm watching you, Chidinma. Every move you make. And when you finally realize you can't survive without me, when you come crawling back, I'll make sure you remember this moment. I'll make sure you pay for your disrespect. His footsteps retreated down the corridor, but Chidinma remained frozen at the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Her baby kicked frantically inside her, as if sensing her distress. She turned to see Adana watching her with eyes too old for a 6-year-old, eyes that had seen too much in the past 3 days. Mama, Adana whispered. Is Papa going to hurt us? Chidinma wanted to say no, wanted to promise her daughter that everything would be okay. But she'd made enough false promises. Instead, she gathered both children into her arms, feeling the weight of the letter against her chest, the proof of her salvation or her destruction. She wasn't sure which yet. What she did know was that Chukwudi had just made a critical mistake. He'd shown his hand too early. He'd revealed that he was desperate, that he needed her cooperation to claim the properties. Which meant she had more power than he wanted her to know. The question was, what was she going to do with it? The plot thickens. What would you do in Chidinma's position? Fight or negotiate? Comment your thoughts below. If you're loving this story of betrayal and revenge, smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Don't forget to subscribe to Echoes of Africa and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. What happens when Ngozi makes her move? Stay tuned. The law office of Okeke and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming glass tower in Victoria Island, a world away from the leaking room in Ajigunal. Chidinma stood in the marble lobby, acutely aware of how out of place she looked. Her best dress, a faded Ankara wrapper and blouse she'd borrowed from her neighbor Mrs. Blessing, hung loosely on her frame. She'd lost weight despite the pregnancy, stress eating away at her from the inside. Adana and Chinedu sat on either side of her, unusually quiet. She'd had no choice but to bring them. There was no one to leave them with, and she'd already missed 2 appointments because she couldn't afford the transport fare from Ajigunal to the island. Today, she'd walked 40 minutes to the bus stop, then spent her last 500 Nigerian nairas on the journey here. Mrs. Okafor? A young receptionist looked up from her desk, her perfectly made-up face struggling to hide her surprise at Chidinma's appearance. Mr. Okeke will see you now. Chidinma rose carefully, her back aching from the long journey. She took her children's hands and followed the receptionist down a corridor lined with impressive diplomas and certificates, past glass-walled conference rooms where men in expensive suits discussed matters she could only imagine. Mr. Okeke's office was exactly what she expected. Polished mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Lagos Lagoon, and walls decorated with photos of him shaking hands with governors and business magnates. The lawyer himself was a distinguished man in his 60s, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed, his agbada pristine white. Mrs. Okafor, please sit. His voice was kind, but his eyes held concern as they traveled from her worn clothes to her swollen belly to her children's thin faces. Can I offer you something? Water, tea, perhaps something for the children. Water would be fine, thank you, Chidinma said quietly, her pride warring with her children's needs. When the receptionist returned with bottles of water and a plate of chin-chin, Adana and Chinedu fell on the snacks with an eagerness that made Chidinma's heart break. Mr. Okeke watched this with an unreadable expression before opening a thick folder on his desk. Mrs. Okafor, I must be honest with you. The situation regarding your mother's estate has become considerably more complicated since my last letter. Chidinma's stomach dropped. How complicated? Your husband has filed a legal claim asserting that all property acquired during your marriage, regardless of whose name it's in, constitutes marital assets subject to division. He's citing the Matrimonial Causes Act. Mr. Okeke paused, choosing his words carefully. He's also filed for divorce on the grounds of abandonment and mental cruelty. Abandonment. Chidinma's voice rose. Mental cruelty. He was the one. He was sleeping with my cousin in our bed. I understand, Mrs. Okafor. But in court, perception matters as much as truth. Your husband has witnesses, including your cousin, Miss Ngozi Nwosu, who are prepared to testify that you have a history of emotional instability, that you abandoned the marital home without provocation, and that you've been keeping his children from him. Chidinma felt the room spin. That's not true. None of that is true. I believe you, Mr. Okeke said gently. But belief and proof are different things. Do you have any evidence of his infidelity? Photographs? Messages? Witnesses? Chidinma thought back to that terrible afternoon. She'd been too shocked to think about taking pictures. Her phone had died that evening anyway. And witnesses? The only witnesses were her 6-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son. No, she whispered. I have nothing. That makes things difficult. Mr. Okeke leaned back in his chair. But there's more you need to know. Miss Ngozi Nwosu has filed a separate claim, asserting that she is entitled to a portion of the estate as your mother's niece. She's produced documents, allegedly written by your mother before her death, suggesting that the Enugu property was meant for her. Documents? What documents? My mother would never. Chidinma stopped, her mind racing. She remembered now. 6 months before her mother died, Ngozi had visited her in Enugu. Chidinma had been busy with Chinedu's hospitalization for malaria and couldn't make the trip. Her mother had been weak, confused from her medications. Those documents are forged. They have to be. Perhaps, Mr. Okeke said carefully. But proving forgery requires resources, handwriting experts, document analysts, court fees. We're looking at several 100,000 naira, possibly more. And Miss Nwosu has already paid substantial legal fees to a very aggressive firm in Ikeja. He paused meaningfully. She seems to have access to significant funds. The implication was clear. Chukwudi was funding Ngozi's claim. They were attacking from two sides, trying to overwhelm Chidinma with legal battles she couldn't afford to fight. So what do I do? Chidinma asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Just give up? Let them steal everything my mother worked for. No, Mr. Okeke said firmly. But we need to be strategic. Your mother was my client for 20 years. I knew her wishes, and I will not let them be subverted by fraud and manipulation. He pulled out another document. However, I must be frank about my fees. I've already done considerable work on this case pro bono, out of respect for your mother. But if we're going to fight both claims in court, I'll need a retainer of at least 200,000 Nigerian nairas to start. 200,000 naira. Chidinma almost laughed at the impossibility of it. She didn't have 2,000 Nigerian nairas to her name, let alone 200,000 Nigerian nairas. I understand, she said dully, standing up. Thank you for your time, Mr. Okeke. I'm sorry I wasted it. Wait. The lawyer's voice stopped her. Please, sit back down. Chidinma sank back into the chair, Adana climbing into her lap despite her pregnant belly. Chinedu leaned against her shoulder, and she wrapped her arms around both of them, this small family that was all she had left. Mr. Okeke studied them for a long moment before speaking. Your mother once told me something. She said, Emeka, if anything happens to me, please make sure my Chidinma gets everything. She's the one who stayed when everyone else left. She's the one who called every week, who sent money when I was sick, who made sure I wasn't alone. She told me you were the strongest woman she knew. He leaned forward. Was she right, Mrs. Okafor? Are you strong enough to fight? Tears burned Chidinma's eyes. I want to be. But I don't know how. I have no money, no evidence, nowhere to live. My husband is right. I am nothing without him. That's what he wants you to believe, Mr. Okeke said quietly. But here's what I know. Those properties generate 850,000 Nigerian nairas monthly in rental income. The Lekki property alone is worth over 50 million Nigerian nairas. The commercial property in Ikeja? Another 30 million Nigerian nairas. Your mother left you an estate worth close to 100 million Nigerian naira. The number was so large Chidinma couldn't comprehend it. 100 million naira. It might as well have been 1 billion. It felt as real as a fairy tale. Here's what I'm proposing, Mr. Okeke continued. I'll advance all legal costs for now. No retainer required. When we win, you'll pay my fees from the estate. But Mrs. Okafor, you need to understand something. This will get worse before it gets better. Your husband and your cousin will not stop. They'll try to intimidate you, threaten you, possibly even harm you. Are you prepared for that? Chidinma looked down at her children. Adana's school uniform was torn at the hem. She'd outgrown it months ago, but there was no money for a new one. Chinedu's shoes had holes in them. And inside her, another baby was growing, another mouth to feed, another life depending on her strength. Yes, she said, lifting her chin. I'm prepared. What do we do first? Mr. Okeke smiled, the first real smile she'd seen since entering his office. First, we get you and your children somewhere safe. I have a property in Surulere, a small flat that's currently empty. You can stay there while we fight this case. No rent, just keep it clean. I can't accept. Your mother was more than a client to me, Mrs. Okafor. She was my friend. Let me do this. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. My driver will take you there after we finish here. Second, we file for an injunction preventing your husband or Miss Nwosu from accessing or selling any of the properties. Third, we request a full forensic audit of the documents Ngozi has produced. And fourth. He paused, his eyes hardening. We prepare to destroy their credibility in court. Hope, fragile and terrifying, bloomed in Chidinma's chest for the first time in days. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Okeke warned. The real battle is just beginning. But Mrs. Okafor? Your mother didn't raise a fool, and she didn't raise a coward. She raised a fighter. It's time to show them exactly who they're dealing with. Chidinma nodded, feeling something shift inside her. 4 days, she'd been running, hiding, surviving. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Her children deserved better. She deserved better. As Mr. Okeke's driver navigated the chaotic Lagos traffic toward their temporary new home, Chidinma's phone, which she'd managed to charge at a neighbor's house that morning, buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She opened it and felt her blood turn to ice. The message contained a single photo, the Lekki property, her property, with a "sold" sign in the yard. Below the photo, 3 words, "Too late, darling." The sender? Ngozi. Oh no. Has Ngozi already won? How can a property be sold when the estate hasn't been settled? Drop your theories in the comments. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe to Echoes of Africa for the next chapter. Share this with anyone who loves a good revenge story. What do you think Chidinma should do next? Comment below, and don't forget to turn on notifications. The small flat in Surulere wasn't much, but compared to the nightmare in Ajigunle, it felt like paradise. There was running water, electricity that actually worked, and most importantly, no leaking ceiling. Adana and Chinedu had fallen asleep almost immediately on the clean mattress Mr. Okeke's driver had helped carry inside, their small bodies finally relaxing after days of tension. But Chidinma couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo on her phone, that cursed "sold" sign mocking her from the screen. How was it possible? The property was in her mother's name, the estate hadn't been settled, and Mr. Okeke had assured her that nothing could be transferred without proper legal process. Unless someone had forged the documents. Unless someone had bribed the right officials. Unless someone was more connected and more ruthless than she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Ngozi. Sleep well in your borrowed apartment, cousin. By the time the lawyers figure out what's happening, there won't be anything left to fight over. Chukwudi sends his regards. Face blowing a kiss. Rage burned through Chidinma's exhaustion. Her fingers trembled as she typed back, "You won't get away with this." The response came immediately, "Who's going to stop me? You. The pregnant woman living on charity? Make me laugh." Another message followed, "Oh, and Chikwudi wanted me to remind you, the children miss their father. Maybe if you're cooperative about the remaining properties, we'll let you have some visitation rights. We'd hate for them to grow up without knowing their daddy. Especially since we're planning to give them a new baby brother or sister soon. Isn't that wonderful?" Chidinma's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. Ngozi was pregnant too, with Chikwidi's child. While Chidinma carried his baby, her cousin, her own blood, was carrying his other child. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she'd experienced before. This wasn't just about property or money anymore. This was about destroying her completely, erasing her from her own life, replacing her with someone who looked at her children as obstacles rather than treasures. She forwarded the messages to Mr. Okeke with shaking hands, then sent one more text to Ngozi. "Tell Chikwudi I said the devil he knows is better than the one he's sleeping with. You'll both learn that lesson soon enough." Her phone rang immediately. Chidinma almost didn't answer, assuming it was Ngozi calling to gloat. But the number was different, local, but unfamiliar. "Hello, Mrs. Okafor?" The voice was female, educated, with a slight Igbo accent. "My name is Obiageli Nwankwo. I'm a private investigator, and I believe we need to talk about your husband and your cousin. I have information that could help your case." Chidinma's heart raced. "Who gave you my number?" "I can't reveal my sources yet, but I assure you I'm legitimate. I've been investigating Mr. Chikwudi Okafor for the past 3 months on behalf of another client. In the process, I've uncovered some very interesting information about his business dealings and his relationship with Miss Ngozi Nwosu." She paused. "Information that suggests fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow, if possible." "How do I know this isn't a trap? How do I know you're not working for them?" "You don't," Obiageli said honestly. "But Mrs. Okafor, your husband isn't just targeting you. He's targeted others before. And he's very good at making people disappear from their own lives. If you want to stop him, if you want to protect your children and your inheritance, you need to know exactly who you're fighting." Chidinma thought of the sold sign, of Ngozi's taunting messages, of Chikwidi's threats. She thought of her children sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, and of the baby growing inside her who deserved a future that wasn't built on lies and theft. "Where and when?" "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. There's a small restaurant in Ikeja called Mama Nkechi's Kitchen. It's public, safe, and neutral territory. Come alone if you can, but I understand if you need to bring your children. Just don't tell anyone, not even your lawyer, about this meeting until after we talk." The line went dead before Chidinma could respond. She sat in the darkness, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed caution. This could be another trick, another trap set by Chikwudi to catch her off guard. But what if it wasn't? What if this Obiageli woman really did have information that could expose them? Sleep finally came in fitful waves, interrupted by dreams of sold signs and Ngozi's mocking smile and Chikwidi's cold eyes telling her she was nothing. The next morning, Chidinma woke to someone pounding on the door. She jolted upright, heart racing, checking to make sure her children were still asleep. The pounding continued, aggressive and demanding. "Chidinma, open this door right now." Chikwidi's voice, loud enough to wake the entire floor. She moved to the window instead, pulling back the curtain just enough to peer down at the street. Chikwudi stood at the building's entrance, dressed in an expensive suit she knew they couldn't afford, or rather, she couldn't afford. Beside him stood 2 men in casual clothes, who looked like they'd be more comfortable breaking bones than following laws. "I know you're in there," Chikwudi shouted up at the building. "You can't hide from me, Chidinma. Those children are mine, and I'm taking them today." Adana woke with a start, her eyes wide with fear. "Mama." "Shoo, it's okay, baby," Chidinma whispered, pulling her daughter close. But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. Chikwudi had found them already, and he'd brought muscle to back up his threats. Her phone rang. Mr. Okeke. Mrs. Okafor, I just received a call from building security. Your husband is there with a court order claiming custody of your children. The order is fake. I checked with the courts, but the security guards don't know that. Don't open the door. Don't go outside. I'm sending someone to help, but it will take 30 minutes. Can you hold out that long? He brought men with him, Chidinma said, her voice tight. What if they break down the door? The door has a security lock. It will hold. But Chidinma, listen carefully, this is exactly what I warned you about. He's trying to intimidate you into giving up. Don't let him win. The pounding intensified. Chinedu started crying, and Adana buried her face in Chidinma's shoulder. In her womb, the baby kicked frantically, responding to her mother's stress. Chidinma. Chukwudi's voice took on a different tone now, softer, more persuasive. Come on, we can work this out. I know you're scared, I know you're confused. But think about our children. They need their father. They need stability. You can't give them that, not in your condition. Let me help you. Let me take care of all of you. We can forget about the properties, forget about everything. Just open the door. For a moment, just a moment, Chidinma almost believed him. The man who had whispered sweet words to her for 8 years knew exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to make his manipulations sound like love. But then she remembered Ngozi's message. We're planning to give them a new baby brother or sister soon. She remembered the sold sign. She remembered him calling her nothing. No, she said loudly enough for him to hear through the door. Go away, Chukwudi. The police are on their way. Police. He laughed, harsh and bitter. You think the police care about a domestic dispute? You think they're going to take the side of a woman who abandoned her home and her husband? His voice dropped to something darker. I gave you a chance to do this the easy way. You're going to regret choosing the hard way. The pounding stopped suddenly. Chidinma held her breath, listening to muffled voices outside, Chukwudi speaking to his companions. Then footsteps retreating down the stairs. She didn't move from the door, didn't breathe easily, until 30 minutes later when Mr. Okeke's security consultant, a no-nonsense woman named Blessing, arrived with 2 police officers and verified that Chukwudi and his men had left. He'll be back, Blessing warned, checking the locks and windows. Men like him always come back. But now we know his strategy. He's trying to establish a pattern of you being an unfit mother, hiding from him, keeping his children away. He's building a court case. What do I do? Chidinma asked. You fight back, Blessing said simply. You document everything, every threat, every message, every time he shows up. You stay strong. And you remember that bullies like him count on you being too scared to stand up. After Blessing left, Chidinma checked the time. 1:15 p.m. The meeting with Obiageli was in 45 minutes. She had no car, no money for a taxi, and 2 frightened children she couldn't leave alone. But she also had information that might change everything. She gathered Adana and Chinedu, explained that they were going on a little adventure, and headed out to catch a bus to Ikeja. Whatever this private investigator had to say, it was worth the risk. Because Chidinma was done being afraid. She was done being nothing. It was time to become the fighter her mother had always known she was. What explosive information does the private investigator have? Is she legit or is this another trap? Drop your predictions below. This story keeps getting more intense. If you're hooked, smash that like button and subscribe to Echoes of Africa. Share this episode with someone who needs to see how this unfolds. What would you do in Chidinma's shoes? Comment your thoughts and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Mama Nkechi's kitchen was tucked into a quiet corner of Ikeja, far from the bustling main roads. The small restaurant smelled of jollof rice and fried plantains, reminding Chidinma that her children hadn't eaten since the previous night. Her stomach growled, but she pushed the thought aside. Food could wait. Survival couldn't. A woman sat alone at a corner table, her laptop open, dressed in a simple navy blue dress that spoke of professionalism without ostentation. She was perhaps in her mid-30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. When she spotted Chidinma with the children, she stood and waved them over. "Mrs. Okafor," Obiageli said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming. And these must be Adana and Chinidu." Chidinma was immediately suspicious. "How do you know their names?" "Because I've been investigating your husband for 3 months, and in that time, I've learned everything about his life." Obiageli gestured to the seats. "Please, sit. Let me order food for the children first. They look hungry." Before Chidinma could protest, pride warring with her children's needs, Obiageli had already signaled the waitress and ordered jollof rice, chicken, and malt drinks for Adana and Chinidu. The children's eyes lit up at the sight of the food when it arrived, and they ate with the desperate enthusiasm of those who'd gone too long without a proper meal. "Now," Obiageli said once the children were occupied, "let me tell you why I called you. 3 months ago, a woman named Ifeoma Adebayo hired me. She wanted to know if her fiancé was cheating on her." She pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Chidinma. "Her fiancé was your husband." Chidinma stared at the photo on the screen. Chukwudi, dressed in one of his expensive suits, his arm around a beautiful woman in a traditional Igbo wedding outfit. They were standing in front of what looked like a church, smiling at the camera like a couple very much in love. "That's impossible," Chidinma whispered. "He's married to me. We've been married for 8 years. "I know," Obiageli said grimly. "Which is why when I started investigating, I realized I'd stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple cheating case." She swiped to the next image, a marriage certificate dated 6 months ago. The groom's name, Chukwudi Michael Okafor. The bride, Ifeoma Adebayo. The world tilted sideways. Chidinma gripped the edge of the table, her pregnant belly pressing against it, making it hard to breathe. "He committed bigamy?" "Not technically. Look closer at the certificate." Obiageli zoomed in on a detail. He used a slightly different name, Chukwudi Michael Okafor instead of Chukwudi Emmanuel Okafor, which is his real middle name. Different enough to slip past bureaucratic checks, especially if you know which officials to bribe. He told Ifeoma he was a successful businessman who'd never been married, no children. He convinced her to buy a house together in Lekki, a house he claimed was his family property that he wanted to sell. Chidinma's blood turned to ice. "The Lekki property. My mother's property." "Exactly," Obiageli confirmed. "I believe your husband somehow learned about your mother's estate, probably through Ngozi, who would have known about family properties. He's been setting up this con for months, possibly years. Marry you, get you pregnant and vulnerable, move you into that small apartment in Surulere while he prepared his next move. Then when your mother died and the inheritance came through, he was ready." "But how can he sell property that's not his?" Obiageli pulled up more documents on her tablet. "Forged transfer documents, making it appear your mother signed the property over to you, then you signed it over to him. I have copies here. The signatures are very good, professional forgeries." He also produced a fake marriage certificate showing you two were married before your mother's death, which would give him some legal standing. "And then there's Ngozi. What about her?" "Ngozi Nwosu isn't just your cousin. She's also a convicted fraudster." Obiageli swiped to a court document. 5 years ago, she was involved in a land fraud case in Enugu. She served 18 months in prison. Her specialty? Convincing elderly relatives to sign over property rights, then claiming inheritance disputes after they died. She's done this at least 3 times before. Chidinma felt like she was falling through space, watching her entire reality shatter and reform into something horrifying and unrecognizable. My mother. Did she know? Did she let Ngozi visit her knowing? Your mother probably had no idea about Ngozi's past. The conviction was in a different state, different name. Ngozi uses her mother's maiden name sometimes. But Mrs. Okafor, here's the most important part. Chukwudi and Ngozi aren't just lovers. They're business partners. I have bank records showing money transfers between them going back 2 years, long before Ngozi moved into your home. 2 years. The affair had been going on for 2 years. While Chidinma was pregnant with Chinidu. while she was working 2 jobs to support the family, while she was believing every lie Chukwudi told her about his struggling business and his need for patience. Where does Ifeoma fit into all this? Chidinma asked, her voice hollow. Ifeoma was the money source. She's a successful businesswoman, owns a chain of beauty supply stores. Chukwudi convinced her to invest 25 million Nigerian nairas into what he claimed was a property development deal, using your mother's properties as collateral. When I told her the truth, she was devastated. But she's also furious, and she wants justice. Obiageli leaned forward. Mrs. Okafor, Ifeoma is willing to testify against Chukwudi. She has documents, recordings of conversations, bank transfers, everything we need to prove fraud and conspiracy. But we need you to be willing to press charges. Criminal charges, not just civil litigation. Criminal charges mean police, courts, publicity, Chidinma said slowly, thinking it through. It means my children will know everything their father did. Your children will know eventually anyway, Obiageli said gently. The question is whether they'll know their mother fought back, or whether they'll grow up thinking their father got away with destroying their family. Chidinma looked at Adana and Chinedu, happily eating their food, innocent of the adult horrors swirling around them. In her womb, the baby kicked, a reminder of another life depending on her choices. What about the sold sign? She asked. Is the Lekki property really sold? The sign is fake. Pure intimidation. They put it up yesterday to scare you, make you think you'd already lost. But Mrs. Okafor, if we don't act fast, they will sell it. The paperwork is ready, the buyer is lined up, probably a shell company they control, and once that transaction goes through, it becomes much harder to reverse. How much time do we have? According to my sources, less than a week. They're rushing the sale through, trying to complete it before your lawyers can get the injunction in place. Chidinma's phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Okeke. Emergency. Court hearing tomorrow 10 a.m. Chukwudi has filed for emergency custody of the children, claiming you're mentally unstable and a danger to them. We need to prepare tonight. She showed the message to Obiageli, who cursed under her breath. He's escalating, Obiageli said. Trying to hit you from every angle at once. The property fraud, custody battle, character assassination. It's a classic abuser tactic. Overwhelm the victim until they collapse or give up. I won't give up, Chidinma said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. Not anymore. What do I need to do? Obiageli smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that reminded Chidinma of a hunter who'd finally cornered her prey. First, we document everything. I need you to write down every instance of abuse, manipulation, and threats. Every message, every conversation you can remember. Second, we meet with my contact at the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Yes, EFCC. This is fraud at a level that interests them. Third, we coordinate with your lawyer to present evidence at tomorrow's hearing that will destroy Chukwudi's credibility as a parent and a person. And Ngozi. Ngozi is the weak link. She has a record, she's pregnant with a married man's child, and she's currently living in your family home claiming rights she doesn't have. Once we expose Chukwudi, she'll turn on him to save herself. Criminals like her always do. Chidinma took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside her, a transformation from victim to warrior. Let's do it. Tell me everything I need to know. They spent the next 3 hours in that small restaurant, Obiageli laying out a plan so detailed and comprehensive it made Chidinma's head spin. Documents were photocopied, statements were written, recordings were saved to multiple devices. By the time they finished, the sun was setting over Ikeja, casting long shadows across the street. One more thing, Obiageli said as they prepared to leave. Ifeoma wants to meet you. She says she needs to apologize in person for being part of his scheme, even unknowingly. Would you be willing? Chidinma thought about it. Another woman who'd been deceived by Chukwudi's charm, who'd lost money and dignity to his lies. Another victim who deserved justice. Yes, she said. We should meet. If we're going to take him down, we should do it together. As Obiageli's driver took them back to the Surulere flat, she'd insisted, saying it wasn't safe for Chidinma to take public transport with the children. Chidinma's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Chidinma. Ngozi's voice, but different now, strained, almost panicked. We need to talk. Not about the properties. About Chikwudi. About what he's really planning. You're in danger. We're all in danger. Is this another trick? No trick. Ngozi's voice broke. I'm scared. Please. Meet me tonight. Come alone. There's something you need to know about that Lekki property. Something much worse than you think. The line went dead. Chidinma stared at the phone, her mind racing. Was this genuine? Had Ngozi finally realized she was just another pawn in Chikwudi's game? Or was this the trap Obiageli had warned her about? She thought about calling Obiageli back, or Mr. Okeke. But something in Ngozi's voice, pure, undiluted fear, had sounded real. The question was Chidinma willing to risk everything to find out what Ngozi knew? Is Ngozi finally ready to confess, or is this the ultimate trap? What could be worse than what Chidinma already knows? Comment your theories. If this story has your heart racing, hit that like button and subscribe to Echoes of Africa. Tomorrow's chapter will blow your mind. Share this with everyone you know who loves intense African drama. What should Chidinma do about Ngozi's call? Drop your advice in the comments and don't forget those notifications. Chidinma stood outside the address Ngozi had texted her, a small hotel in Yaba, the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be found. The neon sign flickered in the humid night air, casting distorted shadows across the cracked pavement. Against every logical instinct, against Obiageli's warnings, against Mr. Okeke's advice, she'd come alone. Well, not entirely alone. Her unborn baby was with her, and Mrs. Blessing, her kind neighbor from the Surulere flat, was watching Adana and Chinedu. Chidinma had also done one smart thing. She'd shared her location with Obiageli and told her if she didn't call within 1 hour, to send help. Room 207. Second floor. Chidinma climbed the narrow stairs, her hand instinctively protecting her belly. Every nerve in her body screamed danger, but Ngozi's voice on the phone had held something Chidinma had never heard before, genuine terror. She knocked on the door. Ngozi. It's me. The door opened immediately, and Chidinma barely recognized the woman standing before her. Ngozi's usually immaculate makeup was smudged, her eyes red from crying. Her hands trembled as she pulled Chidinma inside and locked the door behind them, checking the peephole twice before turning around. Thank God you came, Ngozi whispered. I wasn't sure you would. You have 5 minutes to tell me why I shouldn't walk out right now, Chidinma said coldly. After everything you've done. I know. I know what I did was unforgivable. Ngozi sank onto the bed, her own pregnant belly visible beneath her loose dress. But Chidinma, I need you to understand something. I'm not the villain in this story. I'm just another victim. We both are. You slept with my husband in my bed while I was pregnant. You tried to steal my inheritance. You sent me that photo with the sold sign to torment me. Don't you dare claim to be a victim. The sold sign was Chikwudi's idea, not mine. Ngozi's voice cracked. Everything has been his idea from the beginning. I was just too stupid and too greedy to see it until now. Chidinma remained standing, arms crossed, every muscle tense. Talk. Fast. Ngozi took a shuddering breath. I met Chikwudi 2 years ago at a wedding in Enugu. He was charming, successful, said he was separated from his wife, because you were abusive and unstable. He showed me fake hospital records, fake police reports, made it seem like you were dangerous. I believed him. That's your excuse? You believed a married man's lies about his wife. I know how it sounds. But Chidinma, he's good at this. So good. He knew about my past, my conviction for fraud in Enugu. He said he didn't care, that everyone deserves a second chance. He said we could build something together, a business, a future. He needed someone who understood creative approaches to property acquisition. The euphemism made Chidinma's stomach turn. So you helped him forge documents to steal from my mother? No. I mean, yes, but... Ngozi stood up, pacing frantically. He told me your mother had promised him those properties before she died. He said she felt guilty about how you'd treated him, how you'd turned violent and paranoid. He showed me documents. I thought they were real. I thought I was helping him claim what was rightfully his, maybe getting a small finder's fee for my trouble. And sleeping with him? Was that part of the finder's fee? Ngozi flinched. I thought he loved me. I thought once the divorce was final, we'd be together. He said he was just staying with you until the inheritance came through because he didn't want you to get suspicious and hide assets. He said after everything was settled, he'd leave you, marry me, and we'd raise our children together, his kids with you, and this baby I'm carrying. How noble of you both, Chidinma said acidly. So what changed? Why are you suddenly scared? Because I found out the truth. About Ifeoma. Chidinma's breath caught. You know about Ifeoma? I didn't until 3 days ago. I was at Chikwudi's office. Yes, he has an office, a very nice one in Victoria Island that you don't know about, and I saw documents. Marriage certificate. Bank statements. Property transfers. That's when I realized he'd done to her exactly what he's doing to us. Ngozi's voice dropped to a whisper. But that's not even the worst part. What could be worse than bigamy and fraud? Ngozi walked to her bag and pulled out a folder, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Ifeoma isn't his first extra wife. There have been others. At least 3 that I found evidence of. Women who had money or property, women he seduced, married under false names, then divorced once he'd cleaned them out. She handed the folder to Chidinma. And Chidinma, 2 of those women are dead. The room seemed to shrink. Chidinma opened the folder with numb fingers. Inside were newspaper clippings, printed articles, death certificates. Local businesswoman dies in tragic house fire. The photo showed a woman in her 30s, smiling at the camera. The article mentioned her husband, who'd been out of town on business when the fire started. Woman's death ruled accidental drowning. Another photo, another beautiful woman. The article noted she'd recently filed for divorce from her husband of 2 years, citing irreconcilable differences. Both women had been married to men with variations of Chikwudi's name. Both had died within months of their marriages ending. Both had left behind valuable properties that their grieving husbands had inherited. Oh God, Chidinma whispered, sinking into the chair by the door. Oh God, he's going to kill me. Not just you, Ngozi said, tears streaming down her face. Me too. Maybe Ifeoma. Anyone who knows too much or gets in his way. I think that's his pattern. Marry women with assets, take everything, and if they fight back or become a liability, arrange an accident. She wrapped her arms around her pregnant belly. We're both carrying his children, Chidinma. We're both obstacles now. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Because yesterday, Chikwudi took out a life insurance policy on me. 3 million naira, with himself as the beneficiary. He said it was because of the pregnancy, in case anything went wrong. But after I found these files... Ngozi's voice broke. I think he's planning something. And I think once he's done with me, you're next. Chidinma's mind raced, trying to process this nightmare. Where is he now? I don't know. He's been disappearing for hours at a time, making mysterious phone calls. This morning, I heard him talking to someone about taking care of the problem and making it look natural. I think he knows I found the files. I think he knows I'm a risk. Did you go to the police? With what? My criminal record? My admission that I helped him commit fraud? They'd arrest me, and he'd walk free. Then I'd be an even easier target. Ngozi grabbed Chidinma's hands, her grip desperate. But you have lawyers. You have that investigator woman Obiageli who's been asking questions. You're building a case against him. If we work together, if we both testify, maybe we can stop him before. The window exploded inward with a crash of shattering glass. Both women screamed, diving to the floor as shards rained down around them. Through the broken window, Chidinma saw a figure on the fire escape. Male, medium build, wearing all black. "Run!" Ngozi shrieked, pulling Chidinma toward the door. They burst into the hallway just as the room door behind them splintered inward. Heavy footsteps followed them down the corridor. Chidinma's pregnant belly made running nearly impossible, her breath coming in painful gasps. "Fire exit." Ngozi pulled her toward a door at the end of the hall. They crashed through it and tumbled down the metal stairs, the sound of pursuit echoing above them. Chidinma's phone fell from her pocket, clattering down the steps and disappearing into the darkness below. They hit the ground floor and ran into the street, into the chaos of Lagos nightlife. People, cars, noise, blessed confusion. Chidinma grabbed Ngozi's arm and pulled her into a crowded buka, the outdoor restaurant packed with people eating late-night suya and drinking beer. They collapsed into plastic chairs, both panting, both terrified. "Did you see who it was?" Chidinma gasped. "No, but it doesn't matter. Chikwudi has money and connections. He can hire anyone." Ngozi's eyes were wild with fear. "We can't go back to our homes. We can't go anywhere he knows about. We need to disappear until we can get protection, real protection." Chidinma thought of her children, safe with Mrs. Blessing but vulnerable. She thought of Mr. Okeke, of Obiageli, of the custody hearing tomorrow that she might not live to attend. She thought of the baby in her womb and the baby in Ngozi's, two innocent lives caught in a deadly game. "My phone is gone," she said. "I can't call for help." "Use mine." Ngozi handed over her phone with shaking hands. Chidinma dialed Obiageli's number from memory. The private investigator answered on the first ring. "Chidinma? Where are you? Your location stopped updating 15 minutes ago. Someone tried to kill us. Me and Ngozi. We're at a buka near Yaba. I don't know the name. We need help. Now. Don't move. I'm tracking Ngozi's phone. I'll be there in 10 minutes with backup." "Chidinma, listen to me very carefully. This is now officially a police matter. When I arrive, you're both going into protective custody." "Understood." "Yes. Just hurry." Chidinma ended the call and looked at Ngozi, her cousin, her betrayer, now her unlikely ally in survival. "Why didn't he just kill you quietly? Why send someone after both of us in such a public way?" Ngozi's face went pale. "Oh no. Oh no, no, no." "What?" "It's not about killing us quietly. It's about making it look like we were working together all along, like we both disappeared because we were guilty. Chidinma, think about it. If we both vanish tonight, right before your custody hearing, what does that look like?" The realization hit Chidinma like a physical blow. "It looks like I kidnapped my children and ran off with my accomplice. It looks like we were both involved in stealing the properties. It makes Chikwudi look like the victim." "Exactly. And if they find our bodies in a few days or weeks, it'll look like we had a falling out, killed each other, or got killed by criminals in whatever hole we were hiding in. Either way, he wins. He gets the properties, he gets custody of your children, he gets sympathy as the abandoned husband and father." "Not if we live to testify," Chidinma said grimly. A black SUV screeched to a halt in front of the buka. Obiageli jumped out, followed by two uniformed police officers, and Chidinma's eyes widened, a woman she recognized from the photos. Ifeoma Adebayo strode toward them, fury and determination in every step. "Which one of you is Ngozi?" Ifeoma demanded. Ngozi raised a trembling hand. "Good," Ifeoma said. "Because you and I need to have a very long conversation about the man we both trusted and the fortune he's stolen. But first, we're going to make sure all three of us live long enough to watch him burn." As the police officers hustled them toward the SUV, Chidinma caught sight of a figure watching from across the street. Tall, familiar build, face hidden in shadows. But she knew who it was. She could feel his eyes on her, could sense his rage at his plan falling apart. Chikwudi had made his move. Now it was her turn. 3 women, 1 enemy, and tomorrow's custody hearing could change everything. Will they survive the night? What happens when Chukwudi realizes his victims are fighting back? Drop your reactions below. This story is reaching its explosive climax. Hit that subscribe button on Echoes of Africa so you don't miss the next chapter. Share this with everyone who needs to see karma in action. What do you think happens at the custody hearing? Comment your predictions and smash that like button. The courthouse in Ikeja was already buzzing with activity when Chidinma arrived at 9:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the custody hearing. She wore a simple blue dress that Ifeoma had bought for her the night before. Modest, respectable, the kind of outfit that said, responsible mother, rather than woman living in fear for her life. Beside her walked Obiageli, Mr. Okeke, and surprisingly, Ifeoma. The three women who had been deceived by Chukwudi Okafor were now united in a single purpose: destroying him completely. Ngozi had spent the night in protective custody at a police safehouse, preparing to give her statement to the EFCC. The files she'd stolen from Chukwudi's office, evidence of fraud, bigamy, and possible murder, were now in the hands of investigators who were very interested in a man who'd left a trail of financially ruined women and suspicious deaths across 3 states. Remember, Mr. Okeke said as they approached the courtroom, this hearing is about custody, not about the criminal charges. We need to focus on proving you're a fit mother and he's an unfit father. The criminal case will come later. But we can mention his character, right? Chidinma asked. We can mention whatever is relevant to the children's welfare. And believe me, his character is very relevant. They entered the courtroom, and Chidinma's eyes immediately found Chukwudi. He sat at the opposite table with his lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a designer suit, and he looked every bit the successful businessman wronged by his unstable wife. He'd even brought props, framed photos of himself with Adana and Chinedu, a child's drawing that said, "I miss Daddy," and a folder thick with what Chidinma assumed were fabricated documents. When their eyes met across the courtroom, Chukwudi smiled. Not a friendly smile, a predator's smile, confident and cruel. He thought he'd already won. He had no idea what was coming. The judge entered, Justice Adenike Ogunlade, a stern-looking woman in her 50s with a reputation for not tolerating nonsense in her courtroom. Everyone rose. "Be seated," Justice Ogunlade said, adjusting her reading glasses. "I've reviewed the emergency custody petition filed by Mr. Chukwudi Okafor. This is highly irregular, requesting emergency removal of children from their mother without evidence of immediate danger. Mr. Okafor's counsel, you have the floor. Make it good." Chukwudi's lawyer stood, his voice smooth and practiced. "Your Honor, my client is a devoted father who has been denied access to his children for over a week by a wife who has become increasingly unstable. Mrs. Okafor abandoned the family home without notice, taking the children to an unknown location where she has been hiding from my client." "Not hiding, Your Honor," Mr. Okeke interrupted, standing. "Escaping. From an abusive husband who was caught in flagrante delicto with the petitioner's own cousin in the marital bed while his pregnant wife and children were in the home." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Justice Ogunlade banged her gavel. "Order. Mr. Okeke, you'll have your turn. Continue, counsel." Chukwudi's lawyer recovered quickly. "Your Honor, Mrs. Okafor has made wild accusations without any evidence. My client has witnesses who will testify to her history of emotional instability, paranoid delusions, and violent outbursts. We have medical records showing she was treated for postpartum depression after her second child." "Those records are 5 years old," Mr. Okeke interjected, "and show she successfully completed treatment with no ongoing issues." "Gentlemen, please," Justice Ogunlade said wearily. "This is not a debate class. Present your evidence in an orderly fashion or I'll dismiss this petition entirely." For the next hour, Chidinma sat silently while Chukwudi's lawyer painted a picture of her as an unfit mother, unstable, paranoid, unable to provide proper housing or care for her children. He produced character witnesses, people Chidinma barely knew, who claimed she'd been acting strangely for months. He showed photos of the Ajagunal apartment where she'd stayed briefly, emphasizing the poverty and danger of the neighborhood. It was a masterful performance, and Chidinma felt her hope crumbling with each new lie, each twisted truth. Even the judge seemed to be leaning toward Chukwudi's side. Then it was Mr. Okeke's turn. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm but powerful. "Everything you've heard from Mr. Okafor's counsel is a carefully constructed narrative designed to hide the truth about who the real danger to these children is. With the court's permission, I'd like to call our first witness." "Proceed." "I call Miss Ngozi Nwosu to the stand." The courtroom doors opened, and Ngozi walked in, flanked by 2 police officers. She looked small, frightened, but determined. Chukwudi's confident expression faltered for the first time. Ngozi was sworn in and took the stand. Under Mr. Okeke's gentle questioning, she laid out everything: the 2-year affair, the conspiracy to defraud Chidinma of her inheritance, the forged documents, her own criminal history that Chukwudi had exploited. She spoke about how he'd manipulated her, promised her a future, used her skills at fraud to steal from his own wife. "And Miss Nwosu," Mr. Okeke said, "can you tell the court what you discovered in Mr. Okafor's office 3 days ago?" "Objection." Chukwudi's lawyer shot to his feet. "This is a custody hearing, not a criminal trial. Whatever the witness may have found is irrelevant to—" "It's extremely relevant if it demonstrates that Mr. Okafor poses a danger to the mother of his children," Mr. Okeke countered. Justice Ogunlade considered this. "I'll allow it. But be brief." Ngozi took a deep breath and looked directly at Chukwudi. "I found evidence that he's done this before. Multiple times. He marries women with money or property, takes everything, and when they become a problem, they end up dead. 2 women that I found proof of. House fire. Drowning. Both ruled accidents. Both happened after they tried to leave him or fight back." The courtroom exploded. Justice Ogunlade banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Chukwudi was on his feet, shouting, "She's lying. This is a conspiracy. They've all conspired against me. Mr. Okafor, sit down and be quiet or I'll have you removed from my courtroom." Justice Ogunlade's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Your Honor," Mr. Okeke continued once silence was restored, "the EFCC is currently investigating Mr. Okafor for fraud, forgery, and possible involvement in the deaths of his previous spouses. We have documentation, bank records, and testimony from multiple victims. I've provided copies to the court and to the prosecution." He gestured, and Obiageli stood, carrying a box of documents that she placed on the judge's bench. "Additionally, Your Honor, last night Mr. Okafor or someone working for him attempted to kill both Mrs. Okafor and Miss Nwosu. The police report is in your packet. Both women are currently under protective custody." Justice Ogunlade's face had gone from stern to shocked to furious. She opened the folder Mr. Okeke had provided and began reading, her expression darkening with each page. "Your Honor, if I may," Chukwudi's lawyer began weakly. "You may not," Justice Ogunlade snapped. "I'm reading." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Chidinma watched the judge's face, hardly daring to breathe. Everything depended on this moment, on whether this woman would see through Chukwudi's lies to the monster beneath. Finally, Justice Ogunlade looked up, and her eyes went directly to Chukwudi. "Mr. Okafor, stand up." Chukwudi stood, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume, his confident demeanor cracking. "I've been a judge for 23 years, Justice Ogunlade said, her voice cold with rage. "I've seen bad men. I've seen abusers and manipulators and liars. But rarely have I seen someone with the audacity to come into my courtroom and try to use the legal system to further victimize a woman you've already destroyed." She held up the documents. "Emergency custody? You want me to take children away from their mother based on fabricated evidence while you're under investigation for fraud and possibly murder?" "Your Honor, I can explain." "Explain to the police. Explain to the EFCC. Don't explain to me." She turned to the police officers standing by the door. "Officers, please take Mr. Okafor into custody. There's a warrant here from the EFCC requesting his detention for questioning regarding ongoing fraud investigations." "What? No. You can't do this." Chukwudi's mask finally shattered completely. He lunged toward the judge's bench, but the officers were faster, grabbing his arms and forcing him back. "Chidinma, you vindictive bitch. You think you've won? You think this is over? I'll destroy you. I'll take everything. Those properties are mine. Your children are mine. You are mine. His screams echoed through the courtroom as they dragged him out, and Chidinma watched him go with tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of relief so profound it felt like being reborn. Justice Ogunlade turned to Chidinma, her expression softening. Mrs. Okafor, I'm dismissing this custody petition with prejudice. Your children stay with you, where they belong. I'm also issuing a restraining order preventing Mr. Okafor from coming within 500 meters of you or your children. She paused. I'm sorry for what you've endured. No woman should have to fight this hard just to protect her family. But you did fight, and you won. Your children are lucky to have such a strong mother. Chidinma couldn't speak. She could only nod as tears continued to fall. Mr. Okeke squeezed her shoulder. It's over, Mrs. Okafor. The custody fight is over. 3 months later, Chidinma stood on the balcony of the Lekki duplex, her duplex, watching Adana and Chinedu play in the garden below. The property was everything her mother had promised. Spacious, beautiful, in a safe neighborhood with good schools nearby. The rental income from the Acacia property covered all their expenses with plenty left over. The Enugu property had been sold to pay for the extensive legal fees, but Chidinma didn't mind. She had more than enough. In her arms, 1-month-old Kayamaka, named after Chidinma's mother, slept peacefully, unaware of the battle that had been fought before her birth. She's beautiful, Ifeoma said, joining Chidinma on the balcony with 2 glasses of zobo. The women had become unlikely friends, bonded by their shared trauma and shared victory. Thank you. And thank you for everything you did. The lawyers, the investigators, the protection, I could never have afforded any of it without you. We were in it together, Ifeoma said simply. 3 women against 1 monster. I'm just glad we all survived to tell the story. Ngozi had also survived, though her path was harder. She'd testified against Chukwudi in exchange for immunity from the fraud charges, then moved to Abuja to start over, away from the memories and the judgment. Her baby, a boy, had been born 2 weeks ago. She'd named him Chibik, God is strength. Chidinma had sent gifts and a card. The cousins would never be close again, but they'd found a fragile forgiveness, built on shared survival. Chukwudi was in prison awaiting trial on multiple counts of fraud, forgery, bigamy, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Obiagili's investigation had uncovered 6 victims over 12 years. 2 dead, for financially ruined, all manipulated and betrayed. He would spend decades in prison, possibly the rest of his life. The fake marriage to Ifeoma had been annulled. Chidinma's marriage had been dissolved on grounds of adultery, fraud, and abuse. She was finally, legally, completely free. Mama, watch this. Adana called from below, preparing to show off some new gymnastic move she'd learned. Chidinma waved and smiled, her heart full. Her daughter was thriving in her new school, making friends, slowly healing from the trauma of watching her family fall apart. Chinedu was in therapy, learning to process his confused feelings about his absent father. They would both carry scars, but they would survive. They were strong, like their mother, like their grandmother. Mrs. Okafor? Mr. Okeke's voice came from behind her. He'd stopped by with final paperwork regarding the estate settlement. Everything is complete. All properties are legally and irrevocably in your name. The last of Chukwidi's fraudulent claims have been dismissed. You're officially a woman of independent means. Independent. The word tasted like freedom. What about the criminal trial? Chidinma asked. It begins in 6 weeks. The prosecution is confident. They have everything. Ngozi's testimony, Obiagili's evidence, the bank records, the forged documents, testimony from Ifeoma and the families of the 2 deceased women. Your husband is facing 40 years minimum if convicted on all counts. He's not my husband anymore, Chidinma corrected gently. He's just a man who tried to destroy me and failed. Mr. Okeke smiled. Yes, he is. Your mother would be very proud of you, Mrs. Okafor. You took the inheritance she left you, not just property, but strength and courage, and you used it to save yourself and your children. That's the real legacy. After he left, Chidinma remained on the balcony, rocking baby Kayamika, watching her children play in safety and sunshine. She thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago, trapped, afraid, believing she was nothing without Chukwudi. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, fiercer. Someone who had looked at betrayal and nearly death and said, "Not today. Not ever." Her phone buzzed. A message from Obiageli. Just got word. EFCC found another victim. Wife number 7 in Port Harcourt. She's alive and willing to testify. They're adding more charges. He's never getting out. Chidinma smiled, a fierce expression her children rarely saw but her enemies would never forget. She typed back, "Good. Justice for all of us." She looked down at her sleeping daughter, at the children playing below, at the beautiful home her mother's foresight had provided. Chukwudi had tried to take everything, her dignity, her family, her inheritance, her life. He'd called her nothing, dismissed her as worthless without him. But he'd been wrong. So catastrophically wrong. She wasn't nothing. She was everything that mattered. Mother, survivor, fighter, winner. And she'd made sure he understood that lesson from a prison cell where he'd have decades to think about his mistakes. The sunset painted the Lagos sky in shades of orange and gold, beautiful and promising. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, single motherhood, managing properties, healing her children's hearts. But Chidinma was ready. She'd fought the devil himself and won. Everything else would be easy by comparison. Wow. What a journey from betrayal to triumph. Chidinma started with nothing but ended with everything while Chukwudi lost it all from behind bars. This is what we call karma in action. What was your favorite moment in this revenge story? Comment below. Did you see those plot twists coming? Which character shocked you the most? Chukwudi, Ngozi, or Ifeoma? Let us know in the comments. If this story touched your heart, moved you to tears, or made you cheer for Chidinma's victory, please hit that like button and subscribe to Echoes of Africa. We bring you the most gripping, emotional, real-life inspired African stories every week.